I have to dust off the crystal ball, and here's
Yeah.
my view for the future. The problem is, whenever you predict the future, now people have something that they can anchor you on. I think one of the things, for me, one of the biggest shifts that, actually two big shifts that I think we're going to see, as I mentioned before, we're seeing a wholesale move towards virtual work, far more in terms of scope than we've ever seen before. Part of what that's doing, and this is what I alluded to in the very, very beginning, is there are a whole bunch of people who have been resistant. Now, the resistance can be from a lot of different things. It can be I'm making a conscious choice. Honestly, a little bit of is being lazy. There are things that I could have done to be even more remote and even more virtual. It wasn't exactly worth it in my day to day. That's out the window. People are being forced to do it, which also means people are being pushed straight through the uncomfortable part of the learning curve. So one of the things I think we're going to see is we're going to see a whole lot of people who are more eager to work this way. Now, I think we're going to see an immediate blip as soon as all the restrictions go away. The first thing people are going to do is run in to say, I can finally touch my coworkers and give them hugs, and this is great.
And run away from home.
Run away from home, like a family. I've seen you, great, I love you, I'll be back in a week. Now I'm going to get and see the people that I've been missing in the office. So I think we're going to see, obviously there'll be an immediate reaction, but once that dies down, there are going to be a lot of people who say, you know what, I used to think this virtual work thing is kind of a neat little thing. There's some things that really buys me that I really value. So I think we're going to see greater requirements or greater demands by our employees to work in this way. Plus, I think we're going to see a lot of organizations who maybe were resisting it, saying, well, look, I can't trust my employees to do the work all the time, all the things we were talking about. Some of them are going to say, hey, you know what, it actually worked out pretty well. And maybe I can save on physical space, physical plant, a lot of other things. So I think we're going to see an increase. The other thing is, again, and one of the things I'm very interested in is this work-life blending and balance. This is a very, very difficult challenge, and it has been for a long time. But it's going to come up even more. One of my colleagues, Jen Petrick-Berry, just wrote a book called Couples That Work that's about dual career couples. I know one of the things she's working on a lot right now is how do, for example, dual career couples deal with being now thrust physically into the same space, and you have to work here. And so I think that there's a lot that we need to then further explore about this even more aggressive blurring of home and work. And let's be honest, we all know it. Right? Every one of us has one of these things that reminds us at various times, typically in the middle of the night, you're supposed to be doing this or not. And we check when we shouldn't be checking. That challenge is brought to the forefront even more than it ever has been in the past. And I think that's going to be something that we need to really look at and think about because it has really big impacts on social dynamics, isolation, and relationships going forward.
I think any company can move at least part of their organization to remote. So I mentioned the manufacturing side of it. For example, if you're an automotive company, it's going to be very difficult for you to be fully remote. There will be some part of your business where you need to like bolt a tire onto an axle to actually make the product that you're going to sell. I totally get that. But there's no reason your HR department, your finance department, your marketing department, all of that could be remote. So maybe now going forward, the only part of your business is in this shared warehouse where the physical component is bolted together, but everything else is remote. I think this is a shift because you often hear that my business isn't amenable to remote. It's an all or nothing type of thing because we have a part of the process that involves physical manufacturing. I think that's starting to break down because in this suddenly remote moment in time, you have a lot of those manufacturing companies that are still manufacturing, but their executives and their other parts of the teams are working from home. So now all of a sudden the myth is busted. You're learning that, oh, actually a lot of what we do can be done remotely, even in suboptimal settings. Imagine 6 months from now when you've had a chance to lay the right remote infrastructure, your company is going to feel a lot more fluid than it does right now. I'm actually proud of humanity for how well we've adapted and rolled with this change. And I remind people that this isn't remote work. This is crisis-induced work from home, where you had no planning, no preparation, and you're building the remote infrastructure, teaching your people how to be fluent in remote in real time. This is very difficult and not at all optimal. So I'm proud of humanity as a whole for doing what we're doing. And I think the companies that take this seriously and are intentional about laying this groundwork are going to be much better off, even if a lot of their people do choose to go back to the office. There will be some that don't. And even if you have two offices, for example, you're remote to each other. So you're laying groundwork that's going to benefit the company overall. In terms of where this is going, I think it's a major societal shift. I'm going to give you an example. You have hundreds of thousands of tech workers right now in Silicon Valley that are going to spend the next 3 or 4 months doing their jobs from home. And in 3 or 4 months, the boss might say, all right, time to resume that commute. And I think they're going to collectively look at each other and they're going to say, we just did our jobs for 3 months. I saw my family more. I exercised more. I slept better. I didn't contribute as much greenhouse gas. I spent almost no money on fuel. I cooked more. I'm a better person. I feel happier. I'm more engaged. How about no? I'm not going to go back to the office as the default, and I'm going to continue to do my job. I think the second order of that is once their expensive Silicon Valley lease runs out, they're going to think, so now what's stopping me from moving to Iowa, Idaho, somewhere in Denmark, where I actually want to be? Like, I actually have no reason to be here other than my vocation. So now that I've decoupled vocation and my life, why don't I actually go somewhere with better air quality, better schools, more land, more space, maybe back to my hometown, a community that matters to me where I can actually invest in a smaller place and reap the rewards of that, really pour into the people in some of these communities. And I think the third order of that is businesses are going to see this moment as kind of the awakening, the wake-up call that decoupling geography and your business will help de-risk it. So for example, you look back at Brexit, there are a lot of companies that were based in London that have been permanently altered and impacted by Brexit, which had nothing to do with their business fundamentals. You have companies now that were based in Milan, for example, one of the COVID hotspots, and they're being more negatively impacted than a business in Dallas, Texas, not because of their business fundamentals, just because of socioeconomic factors and global crises that they could have never seen coming. So it's actually going to strike businesses as a way to remove risk from how they operate, to reduce the amount of real estate that they own, and empowering people to work from anywhere. It'll make them more flexible as a business. I'm actually really optimistic about the future. I think people in this time of isolation are finding more innovative ways to connect with people, to engage with people. They're doing Zoom double dates. We're getting kids on Zoom calls and letting them connect across oceans and speak different languages to each other and show off different toys to each other. This is fascinating stuff that if this had not happened, I don't think humanity would have paused to do it. I think we're also realizing that community matters, family matters, and it's a great moment to question, how tightly should your identity be tied to work? Should we actually be filling some of those voids of the happy hours with actually spending time with our own families or in our own communities? I think this is going to be a key thing that people as a whole think about and talk about in the year ahead, and it wouldn't have happened without this. So I'm optimistic about it. I think that this change will, on the whole, be really good. And remote is going to empower more people to contribute more. It's going to create a more inclusive work environment on the whole. So I'm excited about it. It's upsetting that it took a tragedy to get us here, but I think we're going to do something great with this.
So it's interesting. I've always seen remote work gaining some momentum at points of disasters, in a sense, or when people were pressed for need for remote work. For example, there had to be an earthquake for people to think about it. There had to be a 9/11 for people to think about it. There had to be a COVID for people to think about it. And people, organizations have either continued with this in some manner or they have gone back to the earlier ways of working. It is almost like one step back and two steps forward. So I would expect some of the organizations which have passed the stress test in a way to accelerate application of some of these findings or their experiences and continue to offer this in some way. People have spoken to have mentioned that they have now become very efficient and they would want to continue with this and that they would wish their organizations would offer it to them. So it is very likely that going forward, organizations and employees would want this to continue. But on the other hand, I'm kind of curious to see how it might play out. On the other hand, we also have this economic reality. People are getting laid off, and there are furloughs, and people are concerned about their presence in the organization because remote work can, in fact, some of the studies that I have been carrying out and some of the data that I have found is that it has an impact on the performance rating that a person receives and their promotion chances. And so they might choose to continue, in fact, double up on their presence in office if they are worried about their work.
To counter out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
Yeah, and exposure does play a big role. So I'm curious as well.
Absolutely. So it depends quite a bit on the job security that the person enjoys, the type of job that the person is carrying out, and the organization culture. Quite a few factors.
I think we'll continue to see the acceleration. I mean, I think the world, given that everyone is facing this and impacted in some level by this this pandemic, that's going to change the way we behave and the way we look at things like our people, look at things like our automation strategies, et cetera. So I don't think that's going to go away. And I think the reality of preparing ourselves for the next time this happens, we have to consider that, right? And so simply going back to the same way we worked and places we worked and the shape of jobs isn't going to fly in that kind of a future. So the next time this were to happen, if we had a workforce that was prepared for this technologically, but also with skilling programs, then this doesn't become the shutdown that it has become. And we'll continue to provide all the data we can to support that. I mean, Faethm's vision of keeping the world's workers employable doesn't stop there. I mean, we apply Faethm in the education space as well, so that we make sure we're building the right curriculum. We apply Faethm even in the kind of investor space, how we make investment decisions based on how companies are treating automation. Are you automating responsibly? We think that should be something companies are judged on. We can't simply pass the buck, as it were, onto those who have been automated to try and figure this out and absorb it. Corporates, governments, and individuals all have a role to play into preparing for that future.